Hundreds of protesters in Peru's capital came out on the streets to demand the scrapping of a new law that describes transgender people as having a mental illness.
Gender identities stopped being considered pathologies many years ago, says transgender activist Gahela Carey Contreras. She says this is a transphobic law.
Transgender, non-binary, and intersex are now considered mental illnesses in Peru. But what did anybody think they were, girl?
And that's shade.
What's up, everybody? Ty Rivera here, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world. Before we get started, I'm just gonna ask that you like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to comment just to help me on the algorithm, but you don't know what to comment, just put a knife, because you know trans community loves to come for my neck.
Okay, sis. Let's play the game.
But here's the deal, you guys. Peru has decided that trans, non-binary, and intersex are now considered mental illness. When I first got sent this headline, because it was sent to me by my East Coast bestie, Renee, what I thought immediately was this is probably being done for insurance reasons. This was legitimately my first thought, was that it was probably being done so that trans people could be covered the way that they need to be covered as far as their gender affirming care goes, and that just had to include the entire spectrum so that it would respect the way that people identify as well as the conditions that they may be dealing with. That was my first thought. Call me crazy, call me mentally ill, because I immediately take a logical approach to almost everything involved. So I read the article, and I'm gonna read you guys the article as well, but spoiler alert, I was right. And we're gonna get into this article, but the only group that I don't think should be included in this that was mentioned is intersex. And I don't mean that at all to exclude intersex people from the community. I just have always felt that intersex people should be treated as their own thing, because we can debate about LGBT all we want. As far as gay, lesbian, trans goes, there's been the argument forever, nature versus nurture, trying to figure out how our brains work. It's a complex situation, not anything that we're going to be able to figure out now. But true intersex people are born the way that they're born, and there's no denying it.
Intersex is an umbrella term for people born with sex traits, like genitals, reproductive organs, and chromosomes, that fall outside the traditional conception of male or female bodies.
So I really don't feel like they should be lumped in with the community, because they are without a doubt not a choice or not anything that may have happened after they were born. Just my opinion, but if you guys disagree, let me know down in the comments. And please, because I posted what intersex is, the definition of it, nobody has to chime in with the, well, this many people say that they're intersex, but these people are actual intersex. I'm talking about the actual intersex people. I'm not talking about the people that just say they're whatever, because we're going to address that in a second. So I don't need anybody to act like intersex isn't an actual thing, because it is an actual thing. I just post the definition so that people that completely don't know what that is, because a lot of people don't know.
Most people just don't know what intersex means.
Because the
to us LGBTQIA+
community sucks at explaining what things are. So I'm going to explain a few things in this video for people, so that the people that truly have no idea at least have some idea of the way that this all works out. So let's get on with the article before you guys upset me. Okay. So I decided to pick this article from Pink News because they're an LGBT group, and I wanted to get their annoying slant on this. I don't agree with Pink News most of the time, but I feel like if I'm going to do an LGBT story, like one that's so specific, I should get their whiny perspective so I know exactly what we're dealing with in the debate here. Because that's where the debate's coming from. Because if you ask any normal person, they're like, yeah, those are definitely mental illnesses. And it's not to be hateful and it's not to be mean. It's just that's what those are. We'll get into it a little bit more in a second. Give me a second, you guys. Getting all worked up over here. Okay, so the headline reads, Peru classifies trans people as mentally ill after government decree. Trans, non-binary, and intersex people in Peru are now classified as mentally ill following a decree from the government's health ministry. The decree, signed by Peruvian President Dina Boluarte, defines transsexualism and gender identity disorder as mental illnesses. It also categorizes dual-role transvestitism, fetishistic transvestism, and other gender identity disorders under the same bracket of mental illness. And to me, that makes sense, because if nobody knows where trans came from, trans originally stood for transsexual. When I was younger, people thought that they would have a sex change, or it was defined as a sex change when I was younger. Then people realized that you couldn't change a person's sex, but you could change a person's gender. because sex is what you're biologically born and gender is what society deems that biology to mean as far as the way you dress, the things you like, your interest in general. So there's a lot that goes into that conversation, and I know some people will get mad at me for making a distinction between the two, but I'm just trying to let you guys know what the argument is here and what people thought. So then that's where transgender came from. And for a while, transgender was synonymous with transsexual, going from male to female or female to male. At a point, transgender turned into absolutely anything. But true transsexual people still do exist. And if you think that you're born in the wrong body, or your brain tells you that you were born in the wrong body, what could that be other than mental illness? And I don't mean that at all as an insult to transsexual people. I don't mean that as an insult to mentally ill people. I am a huge proponent of mental health. I never shame anybody about their mental health. I'm very big on that. But what's happened with transgender to me, with people identifying as things that really do have a diagnosis to them, because while they're making a big deal of this in Peru, gender dysphoria is the way that they describe it as far as people being actual transsexual and having the need for medical intervention and at the very least therapy to deal with what it is they're going through mentally because of being transsexual or transgender, as they put it nowadays. So for me, the people that are mad because they identify as these things, but they don't claim to deal with gender dysphoria on any level, are the real problem in this situation. Because it would be the same as if I said I was bipolar. I identify as bipolar. Never mind the fact that I'm not bipolar. Never mind the fact that a doctor has never diagnosed me as bipolar. I just decided that it was cool to be bipolar, so I'm going to identify as bipolar. And this is the way a bipolar person dresses, and this is the way a bipolar person thinks, and I am proud to be bipolar. And I'm like, this isn't a mental illness. It's just an identity for me. I think it's cute to be bipolar. There's no reason that I should need medication because I'm bipolar. There's no reason that I should need therapy because I'm bipolar. I just identify as bipolar because it's more fun than the boring life that I have right now of not being bipolar. Bipolar is exciting. Bipolar is fun. Bipolar is where it's at. Bipolar pride. 100% that's me, bipolar. And then an actual bipolar person is like, hey, I'm actually dealing with something over here. I need medication. I need therapy. I need to be taken care of. I need for the government to be able to cover these things that I may or may not be able to afford, but I definitely do need. And there are certain allowances that I need, and there are certain treatments that I need to have access to, that if I don't have this diagnosis that is a medical and a clinical diagnosis, I will possibly be a danger to myself or others, which is what a lot of true people that are gender dysphoric really go through. They do actually, in some cases, deal with thoughts of unaliving themselves or just everyday depression because in their minds, nature has made this huge mistake and they are not able to live as their authentic selves. People can argue back and forth whether or not that's genuine. I know from seeing certain people and having certain friends that that really is a thing. A lot of my friends used to get checks from the state as well. They got what was called a GR check, which became known as a crazy check. That's what they used to call it on the streets. So they would get a certain amount of money that was sort of like a welfare because since they had a disability with their gender dysphoria, and at the time society wouldn't really hire trans people, they needed some assistance. And the check wasn't enough for them to live off, for sure. I think the checks my friends used to get were around $400 a month, if I remember correctly. And there were certain services that they had access to, like I believe they had access to Section 8, but if you know the list with Section 8 housing, that's a whole nother story. So we won't get into that, but there were certain things that they needed help with. So that's why it's important that the government be able to cover these things. But when you decide to turn what's an actual diagnosis into just a fun way to identify, that's where the problem comes in. But let's keep going. The country's health ministry reportedly claimed following the decree's announcement that it was the only way it could guarantee full coverage of medical attention for mental health. Do I know my shit or do I know my shit? Anyway, the decree will change language in the Essential Health Insurance Plan, PEAS, to reflect the view of trans and intersex people as a mental health disorder. The Health Ministry stressed in a statement on Friday, May 11th, that despite the decree, LGBTQ plus people should not be subjected to so-called conversion therapies, and pointed to a 2021 resolution which protects against conversion therapy practices. See, because that's the big thing that they say that they're worried about, is that they could be subject to conversion therapy. But when the government is telling you outright that they are not going to be subjected to that, I think that at that point they should take their government at their word. I don't know what the deal has been in Peru up until now and what they've been dealing with, but at the same time, I think that sometimes you have to give the powers that be the benefit of the doubt if this is supposedly being done to offer more benefits that may be very helpful to some people in your community. Trans groups across Peru have loudly condemned. Does the trans community do anything that isn't done loudly? Honestly, trans groups across Peru have loudly condemned the decision as a step backwards for the country's already complex relationship with LGBTQ plus rights. Geisner Bacaya, director of Outfest Peru, said in a statement posted on X, Twitter, that Peru's trans community will not rest until the decree is repealed. Then don't rest, girl. Nobody cares. Nobody's sweating you like that. That's the thing. People have gotten so tired of this. I mean, like, I hope you're able to do it on your own as a community, because looking for help from the outside, it's going to be scarce, it's going to be few, and it's going to be far between. Because if you're looking for help from the LGBT in the United States, we've seen how out of hand this has all gotten. So we're coming to you from the future and telling you this isn't going to work out to your benefit. When it comes to actual trans people, actual intersex people, non-binary really isn't a thing, so I'm not going to pretend like that's part of the crew. But when it comes to people that really are dealing with this, my heart goes out to them, because having to humor the whole bunch when most trans people agree that what they are going through is not a badge of honor. Really what they want is just to be able to get the medical care that they actually do need. They're not trying to flaunt it for everybody. They're not forcing their way into anybody's spaces. But since you have all the just for fun people that want to pretend that they're this so that they can wear this victimhood as a badge of honor, that's where you run into problems, and that's where all the LGBT people I know will not be lining up to help this out, because just like it has in the United States and everywhere else, the trans activists are going to mess this up. So good luck with it. I mean, like, if you don't want to rest, don't rest. He continued that the government has nothing better to do than to attack trans people with the decree, adding that it comes over 100 years following the decriminalization of homosexuality in Peru in 1924. I don't see anybody talking about homosexuality.
I don't think you're a homosexual, man.
I mean, like, I'm constantly being told by trans activists being trans isn't the same as being homosexual. So what does this have to do with the decriminalization of homosexuality? It's two different things, according to you. Similarly, the LGBTQ plus rights group, Red Peruana, deplored the move for further stigmatizing the Peru trans community, saying that the policy is based on an outdated view of gender identity. Like I said, that's the problem, is this wasn't meant to be an identity. You're taking something that was meant to be an actual diagnosis and you're trying to turn it into an identity, but then you still want it to be treated like a diagnosis. If it's supposed to be treated seriously as a medical condition that you need some kind of affirming care for, let's take you at your word and say that gender affirming care is needed. Don't you have to have a diagnosis to actually get treated for something? Because otherwise, if you want to get your breast removed, or if you wanted to get a bottom surgery of any particular kind, that would fall under cosmetic or elective. That's the way that would work, and that would not be covered by the government. So yes, it does actually have to be a diagnosis for them to cover medical treatments through insurance, whether that's a universal health care or a private insurer. Either way, you need something to get these done. I can't just have my eyelids done because I think I would look better with bigger eyes. You really have to have your eyelids drooping into your line of vision, and it has to be a medical condition for it to be covered by insurance. Otherwise, I have to pay for it because, again, it is elective or cosmetic. Are we following following along? Does that make sense, or does that sound discriminatory? Is it because I'm brown that they won't do my eyes for me through insurance or access? Percy Maida Tristan, a medical researcher at Lima Scientific University of the South, told The Telegraph that the decree lacks awareness of complex LGBTQ plus issues. Well, that's where you expect too much from the government, because the government really isn't here for your feelings. That's just not what they're about. So you can try to make them be about that. Maybe Peru is different than the United States, but I don't really know, as much as they pretend to run on those things, I don't really know too many politicians or people that are involved in the bureaucracy that care a lot about feelings and are going to really dig into the complexities of the LGBTQ community. Usually medical care, especially government funded medical care, is kind of just covered under an umbrella, and you either fall under that umbrella or you don't. They're usually not going to go into a lot of complexities with you, but maybe Peru's different, maybe, I don't know. You can't ignore the context that this is happening in a super conservative society where the LGBT community has no rights and where labeling them as mentally ill opens the door to conversion therapy. Well, I personally would argue, if you're trans, that is obviously a mental issue that you have to deal with, because if otherwise your body is healthy, let's say you have healthy breast, healthy nether regions, I don't know how to word that for YouTube, but let's say you're healthy from head to toe, healthy person, but you still feel like you were born in the wrong body and you need some surgeries to correct this, or you need to be addressed a certain way in order to feel like the person you are. If it's not a physical issue, then it would have to be a mental issue. So it makes sense to me that's the way it would be treated. An Ipsos poll from early 2023 found that 81% of Peruvian citizens believe trans people face a great deal of discrimination in society today. And that part may very well be true in this country as well. But at the same time, I think that a lot of the discrimination that's happening to actual trans people in society is caused by trans activists as well as supposedly well-meaning trans allies. That's where I believe that a lot of the problems for LGBT in general end up stemming from, because those people are so insufferable and cloud the field so much when it comes to issues like this, that in a lot of cases, when you're needing public sympathy or public outcry, you're not going to get it, because nobody was going to stand up for a group of people that activists and allies make us think that we don't like. I personally remain steadfastly supportive of trans people that are truly dealing with trans people issues. But as far as just you thinking it's cute to identify a particular way, I don't have your back. I'm not going to pretend that I'm an ally to you. I'm not going to pretend I'm in support of you, and I'm not showing up to any marches or rallies. Anyway, let me know what you guys think down below in the comments. As always, this has been Ty Rivera, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world.